No nanny survived 3 days with the billionaire's twins, until she arrived and did the impossible. The ninth nanny lasted exactly 67 hours. Callum Prescott stood in his penthouse office, 40 floors above Chicago's bustling downtown, watching the elevator doors close on yet another defeated caregiver. Mrs. Patterson, a woman with 20 years of experience and glowing references, had walked out clutching her purse like a shield, mascara smudged, muttering something about impossible children and lost causes. He loosened his silk tie, the weight of another failure settling on his shoulders like snow that never melts. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan stretched endlessly, its gray waters mirroring the storm clouds gathering in his chest. Margaret would have laughed at this mess. The thought hit him like it always did. Sudden, sharp, leaving him breathless. 6 months. 6 months since pneumonia had stolen the woman who'd raised him, who'd promised to help him raise his daughters, who'd been the steady heartbeat of their unconventional family. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Elena Foster arriving in 15 minutes. Last interview scheduled. Callum walked to his desk, past the family photo that still felt incomplete. Aria and Isla, his 5-year-old twins, smiled up at him from the silver frame. Gap-toothed grins from last Christmas morning. Margaret's weathered hands resting protectively on their shoulders. Both girls had inherited his dark hair, but their mother's delicate features, though he rarely thought about the surrogate who'd given them life. Margaret had been their real mother in every way that mattered. The intercom crackled. "Mr. Prescott, Miss Foster is here. Send her up." He straightened his charcoal suit jacket and prepared for disappointment. The previous 9 candidates had all followed the same pattern. Impressive credentials, confident promises, then swift retreat when faced with 2 grieving little girls who trusted no one. The elevator chimed. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried. Not the eager clicking of heels he'd grown accustomed to, but the soft, purposeful stride of someone who walked with intention rather than ambition. Elena Foster entered his office and Callum found himself pausing mid-greeting. She wasn't what he'd expected. No power suit, no clipboard clutched like armor. Instead, she wore simple dark jeans, ankle boots, and a cream sweater that looked like it had been chosen for comfort rather than impression. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a loose bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard, forest green, direct, holding a quiet strength that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed walls. "Mr. Prescott," she extended her hand. "I'm Elena." Her grip was firm, warm, real. "Please sit." He gestured to the leather chairs arranged near the windows. "I have to be honest, Miss Foster. You're my last attempt at this. After today, I'm considering other options." She settled into the chair, folding her hands in her lap. "What kind of other options?" "Boarding school, full-time au pairs, maybe moving closer to family in London." The words tasted bitter. "Clearly, I'm not equipped for single parenthood. Tell me about your daughters." The question was simple, but something in her tone made him pause. Not what are their schedules or what disciplinary methods do you prefer. Questions focused on management. She'd asked about them as people. Aria is intense. She feels everything deeply, gets overwhelmed easily. Since Margaret died, she barely speaks to strangers. Isla's the opposite, angry, defiant, protective of her sister. They sleep in the same bed now, even though they have separate rooms. Elena nodded, not taking notes, just listening. They've been through 9 nannies in 6 months. The last one found them hiding in the supply closet, having covered themselves in flour. The one before that discovered they'd filled her shoes with maple syrup. Creative problem solving, Elena murmured. And for the first time in months, Callum almost smiled. Most people call it behavioral issues. Most people haven't lost the most important person in their world. She leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Prescott, can I ask you something? What made Margaret special?" The question hung in the air like incense. Callum found himself looking out at the lake, remembering. She never tried to replace anyone. When their birth mother, when the arrangement ended after delivery, Margaret didn't step in claiming to be their real mother. She just stayed, made pancakes shaped like stars, sang off-key lullabies, let them paint her fingernails blue. His voice grew quieter. She loved them without conditions, without expecting anything in return. And now they're testing everyone to see if they'll stay too. It wasn't a question. Elena had understood something in 5 minutes that trained professionals had missed entirely. The other nannies, they came in with plans, schedules, strategies to fix the girl's behavior. But Arya and Isla don't need fixing. They need time to trust again. Callum studied her face. And you think you can provide that? I think I can try. Not as someone replacing Margaret, no one could do that, but as someone who's willing to earn their trust one day at a time. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a folded paper. Not a resume, a simple contract, handwritten. 6 months. No promises of instant results. No miracle transformations, just consistency, patience, and presence. If it's not working after that time, we part ways with no hard feelings. Callum took the paper, scanning the brief, honest terms. At the bottom, in careful script, she'd written, "Some hearts take longer to heal. That doesn't make them broken." He looked up at her, this woman who'd walked into his world with no grand gestures, no polished presentations, just quiet certainty and genuine care. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow morning if you'd like. But first," she stood smoothing her sweater, "I'd like to meet them, not as an interview or a test, just as Elena, the person who might be spending time in their home." As they walked toward the elevator that would take them down to the family floors, Callum felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Small, fragile, but undeniably real. The elevator descended, carrying them toward 2 little girls who'd learned that love could disappear without warning. Neither Callum nor Elena spoke, both lost in their own thoughts about the delicate work of rebuilding trust. The doors opened with a soft chime, and from somewhere in the apartment came the sound of muffled crying, and a small voice whispering, "I want Margaret to come back." Elena had seen that look before, the way children's eyes become glass when they're preparing to break your heart before you can break theirs. The apartment's living room felt like a museum of interrupted childhood. Expensive toys sat untouched in perfect arrangements, while a small fort made of couch cushions and blankets dominated the corner. Clearly the girls' real sanctuary. The crying had stopped the moment they heard adult footsteps, replaced by an eerie silence that made Callum's jaw tighten. "Arya, Isla," he called softly, his British accent somehow more pronounced when addressing his daughters. "Someone's here to meet you." 2 identical faces peered around the edge of the makeshift fort, dark hair tangled from hiding, brown eyes wide and suspicious. They looked like miniature versions of their father, but where Callum's features were sharp with business world armor, theirs were soft with vulnerability. Elena didn't move closer. Instead, she sat down on the hardwood floor, right where she was, crossing her legs like she was settling in for story time. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Elena." The twins exchanged a look, some twin telepathy that excluded everyone else in the room. Arya, the more sensitive one according to Callum, pressed closer to her sister. Isla, the protector, stepped slightly forward. "Are you the new babysitter?" Isla's voice carried the weight of someone much older, someone who'd learned that adults always left. "I'm someone who might spend time here if that's okay with you both." "It's not okay," Arya whispered from behind her sister. Elena nodded seriously. "That's fair. You don't know me yet." The honesty seemed to catch them off guard. Most adults would have pushed, tried to win them over with forced enthusiasm or promises. Elena simply acknowledged their feelings as valid. Callum remained standing near the kitchen island, watching this delicate dance. He'd witnessed 8 variations of this same scene. Usually it ended with tears, tantrums, or both. "The last lady brought us candy," Isla said, testing, "and stickers with our names on them." "That sounds nice," Elena replied without judgment. "We threw them away," Arya added, then immediately looked worried as if expecting punishment. "Why?" Elena's question held only curiosity, no accusation. The twins looked at each other again. In that silent conversation, some decision was made. "Because Margaret never brought us stuff to make us like her," Isla explained. "She just made us pancakes, and sang silly songs, and let us help with laundry even when we messed it up." Elena's chest tightened. These children had learned the difference between genuine care and performative kindness. No wonder they'd rejected every well-meaning caregiver who'd tried to buy their affection. "Margaret sounds like she was pretty special," Elena said. "She was the best." Arya's voice cracked slightly. "She read us stories with different voices for all the characters, and when we had nightmares, she made hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows." "She died," Isla added flatly, testing this new adult's reaction to their pain. "I know. I'm sorry. That must hurt so much." The simplicity of Elena's response seemed to surprise them. No platitudes about Margaret being in a better place, or reassurances that everything happens for a reason. just acknowledgement of their loss. Callum found himself holding his breath. This was usually when the interviews fell apart. When faced with the raw reality of his daughter's grief, most candidates fumbled, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. "Daddy says you might stay for 6 months," Arya ventured, hope and fear warring in her small voice. "That's the plan, but only if we all agree it's working out." "What if we don't like you?" Isla challenged, chin raised defiantly. "Then we figure out why, and we either work on it together or we decide this isn't the right fit. Either way is okay." From his position across the room, Callum watched his daughters process this radical concept, an adult who gave them agency in their own lives. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" Arya asked, the first tentative step toward possibility. "I do, but probably not as well as Margaret did." "Nobody makes them like Margaret," Isla said firmly. "You're absolutely right." The twins seemed to deflate slightly, as if Elena's agreement had removed a barrier they'd been ready to fight against. "Would you like to see her room?" Arya asked suddenly. Daddy kept everything the same. Callum started to intervene. Margaret's room had been untouched since her passing, a shrine that perhaps wasn't healthy for any of them. But Elena caught his eye and shook her head almost imperceptibly. "If you want to show me, I'd be honored." The girls led them down a hallway lined with family photos. Elena noticed that in every image Margaret was there. Birthdays, holidays, quiet moments. This woman hadn't just been an employee. She'd been the emotional center of their world. Margaret's room was simple but warm. A worn rocking chair sat by the window. Books with bent spines filled a small bookshelf. On the nightstand, reading glasses rested next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. "She always did puzzles before bed," Arya whispered, touching the pen beside the newspaper. "She said it helped her brain get ready for dreams." Elena studied the room with the reverence it deserved. This wasn't just a bedroom. It was a life interrupted, a love story cut short. "She took care of Daddy when he was little too," Isla added. "She had pictures of him as a baby." "Really?" Elena looked at Callum, who stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable with the intimacy of this sharing. "Margaret practically raised me after my mother died," he said quietly. "She was everything." The weight of that admission hung in the air. These children hadn't just lost their caregiver. They'd lost the woman who represented continuity, security, unconditional love. And Callum hadn't just lost an employee. He'd lost the closest thing to a mother he'd had for 36 years. "Sometimes we sleep in here," Arya confessed, climbing onto the perfectly made bed. "When the nightmares get really bad." "Does it help?" Elena asked, settling into the rocking chair. "A little. It still smells like her lotion, lavender and something else." "Vanilla," Callum supplied, his voice rough with memory. Elena rocked gently, the chair creaking with familiar rhythm. The twins watched her, something shifting in their posture. For the first time since she'd arrived, they looked almost peaceful. "Elena?" Isla climbed down from the bed, moving closer to the rocking chair. "If you stay, you can't sleep in Margaret's room. That's still hers." "I understand completely." "And you can't throw away her things," Arya added, joining her sister. "I wouldn't dream of it." "And you can't try to be her." Isla finished. The final test. Elena stopped rocking and looked directly at both girls. "I could never be Margaret. She was one of a kind. But maybe I could be Elena. Would that be enough?" The twins looked at each other, then at their father, then back at this woman who'd somehow passed every test without knowing she was being tested. "Maybe," Arya whispered. And in that single, tentative word, Callum heard the first note of hope his daughters had voiced in 6 months. Elena arrived at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her scheduled start time, but not early enough to seem overeager. She stood outside the Prescott penthouse holding a thermos of coffee and a small canvas bag, watching Lake Michigan catch the first hints of dawn through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows. Her reflection stared back, hair pulled into a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a soft gray cardigan. She looked like someone who belonged in a playground, not a billionaire's home. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer than yesterday. When the doors opened, she was greeted not by Callum but by chaos. "I don't want to go to school." Isla's voice carried from somewhere deep in the apartment, followed by the sound of something crashing. "Arya, please come out of the bathroom. You'll be late for..." Callum's usually composed British accent was strained, fraying at the edges. Elena stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. She followed the sounds of domestic warfare to the kitchen, where she found Callum standing helplessly beside an overturned chair, his usually pristine business suit wrinkled, his dark hair disheveled. "Thank God," he breathed when he saw her. Isla's barricaded herself in her room. Arya's locked in the guest bathroom, and I have a board meeting in 45 minutes that I absolutely cannot miss. Through the apartment, a door slammed, followed by muffled shouting. "What triggered this?" Elena asked calmly, setting her things on the kitchen island. "I don't know. I tried to wake them up like always, told them to get ready for school, and suddenly it was World War III. He ran a hand through his hair. "This is exactly what I was talking about. They're impossible." Elena poured coffee from her thermos into 2 mugs, handing one to Callum. "They're not impossible. They're scared." "Scared of what? School? Getting dressed? Basic human functioning? Scared that while they're gone, you'll be gone too." The words hit him like a physical blow. Callum stared at her, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. "Every morning since Margaret died," Elena continued gently, "they've had to say goodbye to you, not knowing if you'll be here when they come back. Because the most important person in their world disappeared without warning." Another crash echoed from Isla's room, followed by Arya's voice calling from the bathroom. "I don't feel good. My tummy hurts." "The mysterious stomach aches," Callum muttered. "They started right after Margaret's funeral?" He nodded, the pieces clicking into place. "Physical symptoms of anxiety," Elena explained. "Completely normal for children processing grief." She walked toward the hallway, her voice carrying clearly but not shouting. "Arya, it's Elena. I'm here now." The crying from the bathroom quieted slightly. "I brought something in my bag that might help your tummy feel better, but only if you want to see it." Silence. Then the soft sound of a lock clicking. The bathroom door cracked open, revealing one brown eye peering out. "It's not medicine," Elena said. "I promise." Arya emerged, still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. Elena reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small, soft teddy bear wearing a tiny knitted sweater. "This is Benny. He used to live with me, but he's been feeling a little anxious lately. Tummy troubles, just like you. I thought maybe you two could help each other feel better." Arya took the bear tentatively, pressing her face into its soft fur. "He's warm," she whispered. "I heated him up in the dryer before I came over. Sometimes when our tummies hurt from worry, warmth helps." From down the hall, Isla's door opened a crack. Elena pretended not to notice. "Arya, do you think you could show me where you keep your school clothes? Benny's never seen a kindergarten outfit before." As they walked toward Arya's room, Isla's door opened wider. By the time they reached the closet, both twins were following Elena like curious cats. "I still don't want to go to school," Isla declared, but with less vehemence than before. "That's okay," Elena said, helping Arya choose between 2 nearly identical sweaters. "We don't have to want to do things to still do them sometimes. But what if something bad happens while we're gone?" Arya voiced the fear that had been choking them both. Elena knelt down to their eye level, still holding the little bear. "Arya, Isla, look at me. Your daddy loves you more than anything in this whole world. He's not going anywhere. But I understand why that's hard to believe right now." She pulled out her phone. "How about this? Every hour on the hour I'll send your daddy a photo. Him having lunch, him in his meeting, him working at his desk. Then when you get home you can see all the pictures and know exactly where he was all day." Callum, who had been watching from the doorway, felt his chest tighten with emotion. Such a simple solution to a complex fear. "And," Elena continued, "I'll be right here when you get back. Same place, same time, every single day. Promise?" Arya whispered. "I promise. But more importantly, your daddy promises, right, Mr. Prescott?" Callum stepped forward, crouching down beside Elena. For the first time in months, he really looked at his daughters, not as problems to be solved, but as little people carrying wounds too heavy for their small hearts. "I promise, my loves. I will always, always come home to you." Something shifted in the twins' faces. Not complete trust. That would take time, but the first crack in the wall they'd built around their hearts. 30 minutes later, Elena stood at the apartment's entrance watching Callum's driver disappear with 2 properly dressed, reasonably calm children. Isla had insisted on taking Benny the bear to school, to protect him from his tummy troubles. Callum lingered by the elevator, straightening his tie. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "About the fear, about the pictures, about all of it?" Elena smiled softly. "I was 7 when my dad died. Car accident. For months afterward, I was terrified that my mom would disappear too. Every goodbye felt like it might be forever." Understanding dawned in his eyes. This wasn't just professional expertise. It was lived experience. Elena, Go, she said gently. Your board meeting. I'll text you the first photo in an hour. The elevator doors closed, leaving Elena alone in the quiet apartment. She walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and began planning her day. Not a schedule of activities or structured learning, just presence, just staying. At exactly 9 a.m., she sent Callum a photo, him walking into his downtown office building, coffee in hand. At 10 a.m., him gesturing during what looked like an intense boardroom discussion. By the time she picked up the twins from school, she had 12 photos documenting their father's entire day. Look, Arya showed her sister the phone screen as they rode the elevator up. Daddy eating a sandwich. He stayed. And he's coming home soon, Isla added, something like wonder in her voice. When Callum walked through the door that evening, he found his daughters doing homework at the kitchen island while Elena stirred something that smelled like heaven on the stove. Daddy, both girls ran to him, but for the first time in months, they weren't clinging desperately. They were simply glad to see him. How was everyone's day? He asked, loosening his tie. Elena taught us how to make friendship bracelets during our worry time, Arya announced, holding up her wrist. Worry time? Callum looked at Elena questioningly. 20 minutes after school where they can tell me everything that scared them, made them sad, or felt confusing. Then we make something with our hands while we talk. Keeps the worry from getting stuck inside. Such simple wisdom. Such profound understanding. As they sat down to dinner, homemade mac and cheese that somehow tasted like comfort itself, Callum watched his daughters actually eat without coaxing, watched them chatter about their day without tears, watched them look at Elena with something that wasn't love yet but wasn't suspicion anymore either. After the girls were in bed, Elena gathered her things to leave. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Elena. Callum caught her hand as she reached for the door handle. Thank you. Today was... I haven't seen them like this since Margaret. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. Callum, they're going to have bad days again. Healing isn't linear, but today was a beginning. As she waited for the elevator, Elena felt something she hadn't expected. She didn't want to leave. These broken, beautiful people were already becoming more than just a job, and that realization should have scared her, but instead it felt like coming home. 2 weeks into Elena's tenure, Callum found himself checking his phone every hour, not for business updates but for photos of his own life. The images had become a lifeline he hadn't realized he needed. Elena behind the apartment's kitchen island, flour in her hair as she baked with the twins. The girls at their homework table actually smiling. His daughters building an elaborate blanket fort that somehow didn't look like a hiding place anymore, but an adventure. It was Thursday evening when everything changed. Callum arrived home to find the apartment unusually quiet. No chatter from the kitchen, no sound of cartoons, no Elena's gentle voice guiding the after-school routine they'd established. Hello? He called, setting down his briefcase. In here. Elena's voice came from the living room, strangely subdued. He found them in the corner fort, all three of them. Elena sat cross-legged on cushions, Arya curled in her lap, while Isla leaned against her shoulder. Elena's eyes were red-rimmed, and both twins looked like they'd been crying. What happened? Panic crept into his voice. In the past 2 weeks, he'd grown accustomed to coming home to laughter, not tears. We had a Margaret day, Arya whispered without lifting her head from Elena's chest. Elena met his eyes over the girls' heads. It was bound to happen. Today was particularly hard. Tell me. It started at school, Isla said, her voice thick with leftover tears. Mrs. Hamilton asked everyone to draw a picture of their family for the bulletin board. Callum sank onto the couch beside their fort, understanding dawning. I drew me and Arya and you, Isla continued. But then I realized I didn't know who else to draw. Elena's not really our family, but Margaret's gone, and I missed her so much it felt like my chest was breaking. Elena's arms tightened protectively around both girls. So I drew Margaret anyway, Arya added, with angel wings. And Mrs. Hamilton asked why there was an angel in my family picture, and I had to explain that Margaret died, and then I started crying in front of everyone. Callum felt his heart crack. These were the moments he'd been dreading, the inevitable collision between their new normal and the persistent ache of loss. Both girls came home pretty upset, Elena explained quietly. We've been talking about it. What did you tell them? The truth, that families come in all shapes and sizes, that love doesn't disappear when someone dies, and that it's okay to feel confused about where everyone fits. Isla pulled back to look at Elena. But where do you fit? Are you our family or not? The question hung in the air like a soap bubble. Beautiful, fragile, ready to burst with the wrong breath. Elena was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. I think, she said finally, that families aren't just about blood or papers or official titles. They're about people who choose to love each other, take care of each other, and stick around even when things get hard. Like Margaret did, Arya said. Exactly like Margaret did. And like you're doing now, Isla added, something like wonder in her voice. Elena's breath caught. If you want me to be part of your family, then yes, I'd be honored. Callum watched this exchange with emotions he couldn't name. For 2 weeks, he'd seen Elena's professional competence, her gentle wisdom with his daughters. But now he was witnessing something deeper, genuine love growing in real time. Daddy? Arya looked at him with serious brown eyes. Is it okay if Elena is family, even though she's not Margaret? The question gutted him. His 5-year-old daughter was asking permission to love again, to risk her heart on another person who could leave. Sweetheart, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Love isn't like a pie where you run out of pieces. Your heart is big enough to love Margaret forever, and still have room for Elena. Really? Really? And yes, if Elena wants to be part of our family, she's more than welcome. Elena felt tears threatening again. I would love that. All of you. Even when we're sad about Margaret? Isla asked. Especially then. Missing someone you love isn't something you get over. It's something you carry with you. And families help each other carry the heavy things. That evening, after the girls were finally asleep, Callum found Elena cleaning up the kitchen. She'd insisted on making dinner despite the emotional afternoon. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Comfort food that tasted like hugs. You didn't have to stay late, he said, taking the dish towel from her hands. I wanted to. Today was hard for all of us. They worked in comfortable silence, him washing while she dried. It felt domestic in a way that should have alarmed him, but instead felt perfectly natural. Elena, can I ask you something personal? She looked up from the plate she was drying. Of course. Earlier, when Isla asked if you were family, you didn't hesitate. Most people would have deflected, kept professional boundaries. Most people haven't fallen in love with your daughters. The words hung between them, honest and unguarded. Elena immediately blushed, realizing how that sounded. I mean, I know what you meant, Callum said softly, and I'm grateful. They needed someone to love them without reservation. They're easy to love. They're not, actually. They're complicated and wounded and sometimes impossible. But you see past all of that to who they really are. Elena set down the dish, leaning against the counter. Can I tell you something? I was terrified that first day. I've worked with grieving children before, but never in their home. Never this intensively. I was afraid I'd make things worse. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. The admission surprised them both. Elena had meant to keep things professional, maintain healthy boundaries. But somewhere between bandaging scraped knees and reading bedtime stories and holding 2 little girls while they cried for their lost Margaret, those boundaries had dissolved. The girls asked me today if you were going to fire me when the 6 months are up, she said quietly. Callum's hands stilled in the soapy water. What did you tell them? That I hoped not. That I'd like to stay as long as you'll have me. He turned to face her fully, soap bubbles dripping from his hands. In the soft kitchen lighting, Elena looked younger, more vulnerable. Her honey blonde hair had escaped its ponytail, framing her face in soft waves. Her green eyes held a question she wasn't brave enough to ask aloud. Elena, in 2 weeks you've given my daughters something I thought they'd lost forever. The ability to trust again, to feel safe, to believe that people they love won't vanish without warning. They're remarkable children. They just needed time and patience. No, he said firmly. They needed you. I needed you. I just didn't realize how much until... His phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. A text from his assistant about tomorrow's early morning meeting with investors from London. The spell broke. Elena stepped back, suddenly remembering the professional distance she was supposed to maintain. I should go, she said, gathering her purse. Tomorrow's another day. But as she waited for the elevator, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted today. Not just with the girls, but between her and Callum. The way he'd looked at her in the kitchen, the words he'd almost said. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, watching the numbers descend. By the time she reached the lobby, she'd convinced herself she'd imagined the moment of connection. But 40 floors above, Callum stood at his kitchen window watching Elena's reflection disappear into the Chicago night, wondering when exactly his children's caregiver had become so much more than that. And for the first time since Margaret's death, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included not just healing but happiness. At 2:17 a.m., Elena's phone exploded with sound, a ringtone she'd assigned specifically for emergencies. She jolted awake in her small studio apartment, heart hammering as she saw Callum's name on the screen. In the month she'd been working for the Prescotts, he'd never called after hours, let alone in the middle of the night. "Callum? What's wrong?" "Elena, I'm sorry to wake you, but..." His voice was strained, exhausted. "It's Aria. She's burning up with fever, and she keeps asking for you. I've called the pediatrician, but she won't calm down. She's been crying for an hour straight." Elena was already pulling on clothes, phone pressed between her ear and shoulder. "How high is her temperature?" 103.2. "The doctor said to bring her to the emergency room if it goes any higher, but she's fighting me every time I try to move her. She keeps saying she wants Elena. I'm on my way, 20 minutes. Elena, you don't have to. I'm already leaving." The Uber ride through empty Chicago streets felt eternal. Elena stared out at the city lights, remembering her own childhood fevers, how desperately she'd wanted her mother during those scary, disorienting nights. For Aria to ask for her instead of her father spoke to a bond deeper than either of them had realized. The penthouse elevator had never moved so slowly. When the doors opened, she could hear Aria's distressed cries echoing through the apartment. Elena found them in the master bedroom. Callum sitting on the edge of his king-size bed in rumpled pajamas, hair disheveled, holding a sobbing, feverish 5-year-old who kept pushing him away. "Elena." Aria's voice was hoarse but filled with relief. She reached out with both arms and Elena immediately scooped her up, feeling the alarming heat radiating from the little body. "Hey, sweet girl. I'm here now." Elena settled into the armchair beside Callum's bed, Aria clinging to her like a lifeline. "You feel pretty awful, don't you?" Aria nodded miserably against Elena's shoulder. "Everything hurts, and I kept having scary dreams, and Daddy tried to help, but I wanted you." Over Aria's head, Elena met Callum's eyes. He looked devastated, not just by his daughter's illness, but by her rejection of his comfort. "Where's Isla?" Elena whispered, still sleeping somehow. "She's always been a heavier sleeper." Callum ran a hand through his hair. "Elena, I don't understand. She's never preferred anyone over me before. Even with Margaret, when she was sick, she always wanted her dad. Illness makes children regress emotionally," Elena explained softly, stroking Aria's damp hair. "Sometimes they want the person who makes them feel most safe in the moment. It's not about love, it's about comfort." But even as she said it, Elena felt the weight of Aria's trust, the responsibility of being this child's emotional anchor. "The medicine should be kicking in soon," Callum said, checking his watch. "I gave her ibuprofen 40 minutes ago." Elena felt Aria's forehead, still burning but not quite as intensely. "Let's try a lukewarm bath. Sometimes that helps bring the fever down and makes them more comfortable." They moved to the master bathroom, where Callum filled the oversized tub with tepid water while Elena helped Aria out of her sweat-soaked pajamas. The little girl was listless now, the fight gone out of her as the fever peaked. "I don't want a bath," Aria whimpered. "I know, sweetheart, but it might help you feel better, and I'll stay right here the whole time." Elena rolled up her sleeves and knelt beside the tub, supporting Aria as she slowly settled into the water. Callum hovered nearby, feeling helpless and unnecessary. "Daddy looks sad," Aria observed with the brutal honesty of children. Elena glanced at Callum, recognizing the pain in his eyes. "He's worried about you. Daddies get scared when their little girls are sick." "I'm not choosing Elena over you," Aria said to her father, her words slightly slurred with exhaustion. She smells like home now." The simple statement hit them both like a physical blow. Elena's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide, while Callum felt something crack open in his chest. "What does home smell like?" Elena asked gently, using a soft washcloth to cool Aria's shoulders. "Like cookies and laundry soap and that perfume you wear. And safe. Home smells safe." After the bath, they settled back in the living room. Aria had finally stopped crying, curled in Elena's lap in fresh pajamas, her fever beginning to break. Callum sat on the opposite end of the couch, close enough to help, but far enough to give them space. "Elena?" Aria's voice was drowsy now. Are you going to stay until I feel better?" Elena looked at Callum, who nodded immediately. "If that's what you need, yes. Will you sleep in Margaret's room? I don't want you to be far away." The request hung in the air like a prayer. Elena had been careful never to overstep boundaries, never to assume a place in this family beyond what was explicitly offered. But tonight, those carefully maintained lines seemed less important than one sick little girl's need for comfort. If your daddy says it's okay. Please, Daddy. Arya turned pleading eyes to Callum. Of course, he said without hesitation. Whatever makes you feel better. By 4 a.m., Arya was finally sleeping peacefully in her own bed, fever broken, breathing steady. Elena stood in the doorway of Margaret's room, suddenly feeling like an intruder. The space was exactly as it had been left. Personal belongings, half-finished crossword, reading glasses on the nightstand. Elena? Callum appeared behind her carrying fresh sheets. You don't have to sleep here if it makes you uncomfortable. The guest room is... No, it's fine. She might wake up and look for me. They made the bed together in silence, the intimacy of the shared task not lost on either of them. When Callum handed her one of his old t-shirts to sleep in, their fingers brushed and Elena felt electricity shoot up her arm. Thank you, she whispered, for trusting me with her. Elena, tonight, the way she reached for you, the way she found comfort in you when she couldn't find it anywhere else. I've never seen anything like that. Children form attachments in crisis, it's normal. Is it? He stepped closer and Elena could smell his cologne, could see the exhaustion and something else in his dark eyes. Because it didn't feel normal. It felt like she was choosing her mother. The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully examine. Callum, I know we agreed to keep things professional. I know you're here for the girls, not for me. But tonight, watching you with Arya, seeing how naturally you fit into our life, I can't pretend anymore that this is just a job. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between day one and tonight, you stopped being the nanny and became, I don't know what to call it, but it's not professional anymore, is it? She shook her head slowly. No, it's not. They stood there in Margaret's room, surrounded by the ghost of the woman who'd held this family together, both acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted between them. What do we do about it? Elena asked softly. I don't know. The girls have to come first. They're just starting to heal, to trust again. I won't risk that. Neither will I. But I also can't pretend I don't feel whatever this is between us. Elena closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the impossibility of their situation. She'd fallen in love with his daughters, and somewhere along the way she'd started falling for him too. But mixing romance with her role as caregiver could jeopardize everything they'd built. Maybe we should talk about this when we're not running on 2 hours of sleep in the middle of a crisis, she said finally. Callum nodded, stepping back toward the door. You're right. Get some rest. And Elena, thank you for coming tonight, for being exactly what she needed, for being exactly what we all needed. After he left, Elena lay in Margaret's bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She could still feel the weight of Arya's fevered body in her arms, still hear the child's declaration that she smelled like home. But what scared her most wasn't the responsibility of caring for these children, or the complexity of her feelings for their father. What scared her was how right it felt. All of it. The late-night emergency calls, the shared parenting decisions, the quiet moments of connection with Callum. It felt like the life she'd never dared to dream of, and that made it dangerous. Because if she'd let herself believe this could be real, if she let herself hope for a future with this broken, beautiful family, what would happen when reality intruded? When Callum decided mixing business with pleasure was too risky? When the 6-month contract ended, and she was expected to simply walk away? Outside Margaret's window, Chicago began to wake up, the sky lightening with the promise of dawn. And Elena lay awake, caught between the family she was growing to love, and the fear that loving them might destroy everything. 3 days after the fever incident, Elena found herself watching Callum make pancakes and wondering when exactly her heart had decided to betray every professional boundary she'd ever set. He stood at the kitchen island in his weekend clothes, dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look almost black, humming quietly while he poured batter into star-shaped molds. It was Saturday morning, and for the first time since she'd started working for the Prescotts, Elena had stayed for breakfast. You don't have to do that, she said, nursing her second cup of coffee. I can make breakfast. You've been here since Thursday night taking care of Arya. The least I can do is feed you. He glanced over his shoulder and their eyes met for a moment too long before both looked away. Everything felt different since their middle-of-the-night conversation in Margaret's room. Not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with an awareness that neither knew how to handle. Elena, Arya bounded into the kitchen, fully recovered from her fever and back to her energetic 5-year-old self. Look what I made you. She thrust a construction paper card into Elena's hands. On the front, in careful kindergarten letters, it read, "Thank you for staying." Inside was a drawing of 3 stick figures under a rainbow, a tall one labeled Elena, a medium one labeled me, and a tiny one that might have been meant to be Benny the Bear. Arya, this is beautiful, thank you, sweetheart. I made one for Daddy too, but his is different. Arya climbed onto the stool beside Elena. His says, "Thank you for letting Elena stay." Callum's hand stilled over the pancake pan. Elena felt heat creep up her neck. "That was very thoughtful of you," Elena managed. "Isla helped with the spelling. She's better at writing than me. Where is your sister this morning?" "Still sleeping. She stayed up late reading under her covers with a flashlight. I told her you'd probably notice the light under her door, but she said you wouldn't tell on her because you're not a real grown-up. You're a friend grown-up." Elena and Callum exchanged a look across the kitchen. In Isla's 5-year-old logic, she'd identified exactly what made their situation so complicated. "Am I in trouble for the flashlight?" Isla's voice came from the hallway, followed by the appearance of a girl with spectacular bedhead and guilty eyes. "Not from me," Elena said, "but maybe we can find a better reading light for your room so you don't strain your eyes." "See?" Isla looked triumphantly at Arya, friend grown up. As they ate breakfast together, star-shaped pancakes that somehow tasted better because Callum had made them, Elena found herself memorizing details. The way Arya hummed while she ate, just like her father. How Isla systematically ate around the edges of her pancakes before tackling the center. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning everything golden. It felt so much like a family breakfast that Elena had to remind herself it was temporary. "Elena?" Arya's syrup-sticky voice interrupted her thoughts. "Are you going to come to our school play next week?" "What school play?" "The spring concert," Callum explained. "All the kindergarten classes are singing songs about growing things. The girls have been practicing for weeks." "We're flowers," Isla announced. "I'm a sunflower and Arya's a rose." "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to come if it's okay with your daddy." "Please?" Arya turned pleading eyes to Callum. "All the other kids' mommies and daddies will be there." The word mommies hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Elena felt her chest tighten, while Callum's jaw tensed almost imperceptibly. "Of course Elena can come," he said carefully, "if she wants to." After breakfast, while the girls played in their room, Elena helped Callum clean up the kitchen. They worked in the comfortable silence they'd developed, but the unspoken conversation from Thursday night hummed between them. "Elena," Callum said finally, hanging up the dish towel, "about the other night." "Daddy?" Isla appeared in the kitchen doorway holding her tablet. "Can we video call Grandpa William? I want to show him my loose tooth." "Of course, love." Callum looked apologetically at Elena. "My father likes to check in on weekends." Elena started to gather her things, assuming this was family time, but Isla caught her hand. "Stay. Grandpa William should meet Elena." Before Elena could protest, Isla had dragged her to the living room couch and was setting up the tablet. Callum sat beside them, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The screen flickered to life, revealing an older man with Callum's dark eyes and a distinguished gray beard. He was clearly in an elegant study somewhere, probably the family estate in England that Callum had mentioned in passing. "There are my beautiful granddaughters." William Prescott's voice carried the same slight British accent as his son. "How are you both?" "Grandpa, look." Arya wiggled her loose tooth. "Elena says the tooth fairy brings different coins in America than in England." William's eyes shifted to Elena with obvious curiosity. "And who might Elena be?" "She's our—" Isla started, then paused, clearly trying to figure out how to explain Elena's role. "I'm their caregiver," Elena said simply. "Elena Foster." "Ah, the famous Elena." William's eyebrows rose with interest. "Callum's mentioned you in our conversations. The girls seem quite taken with you. The feeling is mutual. Elena makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches," Arya announced. "And she knows how to braid hair in a fishtail and she doesn't get mad when we're loud. She stayed all night when I was sick," Isla added. "And she sleeps in Margaret's room sometimes when we have bad dreams." Elena felt Callum tense beside her. This was exactly the kind of boundary blurring that made their situation so complicated. "Margaret was very special to our family," William said gently, his eyes holding Elena's through the screen. It sounds like you're helping the girls through a difficult time. I'm trying to. Grandpa, Arya interrupted. Elena might come to our school play. She's never seen us sing before. How wonderful. I'm sure you'll both be magnificent. William's attention returned to Elena. And how are you finding Chicago, my dear? I know it's quite different from... Forgive me, where are you from originally? Portland, Oregon. And I love Chicago. It's been an adventure. Something in her tone made Callum look at her sharply, but Elena kept her expression neutral. After they ended the call, the girls ran off to play, leaving Elena and Callum alone again. I should apologize for that, Callum said. The girls don't understand boundaries when it comes to family calls. It's fine. Your father seems lovely. He's curious about you. I may have mentioned your name more than I intended in our recent conversations. Elena felt her pulse quicken. What did you tell him? That you're exceptional. That the girls have bonded with you in a way I've never seen before. And, Callum hesitated, then decided on honesty, that I'm grateful for you in ways that go beyond professional. The admission hung between them, brave and terrifying. Callum, I know all the reasons this is complicated. The girls, the professional relationship, the fact that we've only known each other 6 weeks. But Elena, I can't keep pretending that what's happening between us is just about childcare. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you asking? I'm asking if you feel it too. This thing between us. Because if it's just me, if I'm reading signals that aren't there, you're not. The words escaped before she could stop them. You're not reading signals that aren't there. Relief flooded his features. Then what do we do? I don't know. The girls have to come first. They do. They always will. But Elena, they're happy. For the first time since Margaret died, they're genuinely happy. You've given them that. And what happens if this thing between us goes wrong? What happens to them then? It was the question that had been keeping her awake at night, the fear that made her stomach clench with anxiety. I don't know, Callum admitted. But I do know that pretending these feelings don't exist isn't working either. The girls are perceptive. They can sense the tension. Before Elena could respond, Arya and Isla came racing back into the living room, chasing each other with plastic dinosaurs and filling the space with laughter. Elena, will you play dinosaurs with us? Arya demanded, holding up a purple T-Rex. Please? Isla added. You can be the pterodactyl. She flies. Elena looked at these two little girls who'd wrapped themselves around her heart, then at their father who was watching her with an expression of hope and fear and something deeper. Of course I'll play dinosaurs, she said, accepting the plastic pterodactyl. But as they settled onto the living room floor for an elaborate prehistoric adventure, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were all flying into uncharted territory, and she had no idea where they were going to land. The Lincoln Elementary School auditorium buzzed with the particular energy of proud parents armed with smartphones, ready to capture every off-key note of their children's performance. Elena smoothed her navy dress nervously as she and Callum found seats in the third row. She'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, unsure what was appropriate for a school event that felt suspiciously like a family milestone. Around them, couples chatted easily, comfortable in their roles as established family units. You look beautiful, Callum murmured as they settled into the narrow folding chairs. Elena felt heat creep up her neck. Thank you. They sat closer than strictly necessary, shoulders touching, his knee occasionally brushing hers. After last weekend's confession of mutual feelings, every casual touch felt charged with possibility and danger. There they are. Callum pointed to the side of the stage where a line of kindergartners peeked out from behind a makeshift curtain. Elena spotted Arya immediately, yellow petals attached to a green headband making her look like a sunflower, just as promised. Isla stood beside her sister, taller petals creating a cheerful rose costume. Both girls scanned the audience until they found Elena and Callum, then waved enthusiastically. Elena! Daddy! Arya's voice carried across the auditorium, causing several parents to turn and smile. They're adorable, the woman beside Elena commented. Are they yours? The innocent question hit like a physical blow. Elena opened her mouth, unsure how to respond, when Callum's hand found hers. These are my daughters, he said simply. Arya and Isla. It wasn't exactly an answer, but it wasn't a denial either. Elena squeezed his hand gratefully. The lights dimmed, and Mrs. Hamilton, the kindergarten teacher, stepped forward with a microphone. Welcome, families, to our spring growth concert. Our students have been working hard to share songs about how living things grow and change. Please join me in celebrating these amazing children. The first song was about seed sprouting, performed by the pre-K class. Elena watched Callum watching the tiny performers, noting how he smiled at their enthusiasm, despite his daughters not being on stage yet. "You're a good father," she whispered impulsively. He turned to her, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. "What makes you say that? The way you're enjoying this, even the parts that aren't about your girls. Margaret raised you well." Something passed across his features, gratitude mixed with old grief. "She would have loved this. She never missed a school event when I was young, no matter how terrible my singing was. I bet you were adorable." I was tone-deaf and mortified, but she cheered the loudest anyway. The kindergarten classes took the stage, and Elena's attention was immediately captured by Arya and Ela. They stood in the front row, Arya swaying slightly to music only she could hear, Isla standing perfectly still with intense concentration. The opening notes of "Growing Like a Flower" filled the auditorium, and Elena felt her heart swell as 25 five-year-olds began to sing with varying degrees of accuracy and enthusiasm. "We start as tiny seeds so small, buried deep beneath it all, but with sunshine, rain, and care soon will be blooming everywhere." Arya sang with her whole body, arms swaying, face radiant with joy. Isla was more reserved but equally committed, her clear voice carrying over the group during the chorus. Elena found herself blinking back tears at the simple beauty of it all. Halfway through the second verse, Arya caught sight of Elena in the audience, and her face lit up even brighter. She began directing her performance specifically toward Elena and Callum, singing louder, gesturing more dramatically. "She's performing for you," Callum observed with amusement. "For us," Elena corrected without thinking. The word hung between them, loaded with implications they were both still afraid to fully examine. As the song concluded, the children took their bows to enthusiastic applause. But instead of filing off stage with their classmates, Arya broke ranks and ran toward the edge of the stage. "Elena, did you see me? Did you see my sunflower dance?" "Arya," Mrs. Hamilton called gently, "back with your class, sweetheart." But the damage was done. Every parent in the vicinity had witnessed Arya calling out to Elena specifically, treating her as the primary audience for her performance. Elena felt dozens of eyes on her, curious and calculating. "I saw everything, sweetheart," Elena called back. "You were magnificent." Arya beamed and skipped back to her class, but Elena noticed the looks and whispered conversations that had started around them. In a small school community, word would spread quickly about Callum Prescott's mysterious +1. After the concert, parents mingled in the hallway while teachers distributed paper programs and compliments. Arya and Isla ran to Elena and Callum, still wearing their flower costumes. "Did we do good?" Isla asked, breathless with excitement. "You did wonderfully," Elena said, crouching down to hug both girls. "I'm so proud of you both." "Elena, you're crying," Arya observed with 5-year-old directness. Elena touched her cheek, surprised to find tears there. Happy tears. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're very proud. "Like how Daddy cried when we sang Happy Birthday to Margaret in heaven?" Isla asked innocently. Callum's face went still. Elena felt the weight of another family moment she wasn't sure she belonged to. "Exactly like that," she said softly. "Mrs. Prescott?" They all turned to find Mrs. Hamilton approaching with a warm smile. "Oh, I'm not," Elena started to correct. "Elena Foster," Callum interrupted smoothly. "She's family." Elena's breath caught. Mrs. Hamilton nodded, as if this explained everything. "Ms. Foster, I wanted to thank you. The girls have been so much happier these past few weeks. Whatever you're doing is working beautifully. They're wonderful children. They are indeed. Arya especially has come out of her shell since you've been in their lives. She talks about you constantly." Elena felt Callum's eyes on her, but she kept her focus on the teacher. "Mr. Prescott," Mrs. Hamilton continued, "I hope you'll consider volunteering for our end-of-year field day. We could use parent volunteers, and the girls would love having you there." "Of course. Elena and I would be happy to help." The casual way he included her, the assumption that they would participate as a unit, Elena felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, exhilarated and terrified. As they walked to the parking garage, Arya and Isla chattering excitedly about their performance, Elena processed what had just happened. In the space of an hour, she'd been introduced as family, treated as a parent figure, and included in future school events as if her presence was a given. "Callum," she said quietly as they reached his car, "what just happened in there?" He helped the girls into their car seats before answering. What do you mean? You introduced me as family. You volunteered us both for field day. People are going to assume that we're together? Yes. He closed the car door and turned to face her fully. Elena, would that be such a terrible thing? It's not about terrible or wonderful. It's about what's real and what's not. What's appropriate and what's... Elena, Arya's voice came through the car window. Can we get ice cream to celebrate our concert? Please? Isla added. We were really good flowers. Elena looked at their hopeful faces, then at Callum, who was watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Ice cream sounds perfect, she heard herself say. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at a family ice cream parlor, Arya and Isla carefully navigating towering sundaes while Elena and Callum shared coffee and watched them. Elena, Arya said, vanilla ice cream smudged on her chin. Are you going to live with us forever? The question came out of nowhere, innocent and devastating. Arya, Callum said gently. That's not... I don't know, sweetheart, Elena answered honestly. Would you like me to? Yes, both girls said simultaneously. Even when I make you clean your room and eat vegetables? Even then, Isla nodded solemnly. Elena glanced at Callum, who was studying his coffee cup as if it held the secrets of the universe. Well, Elena said carefully, I'm not going anywhere right now. That's what matters today. But as they drove home through the Chicago streets, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that today had changed something fundamental. She'd stepped into the role of a parent figure so naturally, so completely, that pretending otherwise was becoming impossible. The question was whether she was brave enough to stop pretending entirely, and whether Callum was ready to risk everything they'd built for the possibility of something real. Elena found the letter on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her apartment door like a secret meant to destroy everything she'd come to cherish. The envelope was expensive, cream-colored paper with embossed lettering that screamed old money and legal authority. Her name was written in elegant script across the front, but there was no return address. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. Ms. Foster, we represent interested parties who have concerns regarding your relationship with the Prescott family. Your increasingly inappropriate involvement with Mr. Callum Prescott and his minor children has been observed and documented. We strongly advise you to terminate your employment immediately and distance yourself from the family permanently. Failure to do so may result in actions that could severely damage your professional reputation and future employment prospects. This is your only warning. Regards, Morrison, Blackstone and Associates. Elena sank onto her small couch, the letter trembling in her hands. 8 weeks. 8 weeks of carefully building trust, of watching broken hearts begin to heal, of falling deeper in love with a family that had become her whole world. And now this. Her phone buzzed with a text from Callum. Running late from London call. Can you handle morning routine solo? She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could she respond normally when her entire world had just shifted on its axis? Of course. See you tonight. But as Elena got dressed and drove toward the Prescott penthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Every car that followed too long, every glance from strangers on the street felt loaded with menace. Elena! Arya launched herself into Elena's arms the moment she walked through the door. Guess what? I lost my tooth. The tooth fairy brought me a whole $1. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Elena managed, though her voice sounded hollow to her own ears. Elena? Isla appeared with the perceptiveness that sometimes unnerved adults. Are you okay? You look sad. Just tired, honey. Let's get you both ready for school. But throughout the morning routine, making breakfast, braiding hair, checking backpacks, Elena felt like she was moving underwater. Every interaction felt simultaneously precious and final, as if she was already saying goodbye. The day dragged endlessly. Elena cleaned the apartment with manic energy, trying to outrun her thoughts. She organized the girls' art supplies, folded laundry that was already folded, and stared at her phone, willing Callum to call early. When the girls came home from school, they sensed something was wrong immediately. Elena, you're being weird, Isla announced with 5-year-old bluntness. You keep looking at us like we're going to disappear. And you haven't smiled all day, Arya added, settling into Elena's lap with the directness that had become second nature. Not even when I showed you my spelling test with all the gold stars. Elena's arms tightened around the little girl, breathing in the familiar scent of school soap and childhood sweetness. I'm sorry, babies. I'm just having a complicated day. Is it because of the mean letter? Isla asked innocently. Elena's blood turned to ice. What mean letter? The one that made you cry this morning. We saw you reading it by the door when we were getting our shoes. Elena felt the world tilt sideways. If the girls had seen her reaction, if they'd noticed her distress. Sometimes grown-ups get mail that makes them worry, Elena said carefully. But it's not about you two. You haven't done anything wrong. Is someone trying to take you away from us? Arya's voice was small, fragile. The direct question hit Elena like a physical blow. These children had already lost the most important person in their world. They'd watched 9 nannies come and go, and now they were sharp enough to sense that another abandonment might be coming. I don't want anyone to take you away, Isla said fiercely. You belong with us. Elena's voice cracked. I love being with you both, so much. Then stay, Arya said simply. Just stay forever. Elena held them both, feeling her heart break into pieces. How could she explain to 2 5-year-olds that love wasn't always enough, that sometimes invisible forces could destroy the most beautiful things? When Callum arrived home that evening, he found them curled together on the living room couch, Elena reading Charlotte's Web while the twins listened with rapt attention. How are my favorite ladies? He asked, loosening his tie. Daddy! Both girls ran to him, but Elena noticed how they kept glancing back at her, as if afraid she might vanish if they looked away too long. Elena's been sad all day, Arya reported with the honesty of children. She got a mean letter that made her cry. Callum's eyes shot to Elena, sharp with concern. What letter? Elena's stomach clenched. She'd hoped to find a way to handle this herself, to protect him and the girls from whatever storm was coming. But hiding from Callum felt impossible when his daughters had already exposed her distress. Can we talk after dinner? She said quietly. The meal was strained, despite Elena's attempts at normalcy. The girls sensed the tension between the adults and grew increasingly clingy, insisting on sitting closer to Elena, touching her arm throughout dinner as if anchoring her to them. After they'd gotten the twins ready for bed, Elena and Callum finally found themselves alone in the kitchen. Elena pulled the letter from her purse with shaking hands. Callum read it twice, his face growing darker with each word. Morrison, Blackstone and Associates, he said finally. I know that firm. They represent some of the most ruthless corporate families in Chicago. He looked up at Elena, understanding dawning. Someone hired them to investigate you, to threaten you. But who? And why? I have my suspicions. Callum's jaw tightened. There are people in my business circle who've been curious about my personal life lately, especially since the school concert. Elena sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. People saw us together. They're making assumptions. Let them make assumptions. What we have is real, Elena. What you've built with my daughters is real. Is it? The words came out harsher than she intended. Because according to this letter, I'm an inappropriate influence who's taking advantage of vulnerable children and their grieving father. You know that's not true, do I? Elena's voice rose. 8 weeks of carefully contained fears finally spilling over. Callum, I sleep in this house. I make parenting decisions. Your daughters call me when they're scared, choose me over you when they're sick. I've been pretending this is professional, but it stopped being professional months ago. And that's a problem? Yes, because when this inevitably falls apart, those little girls will be the ones who pay the price. They'll lose another person they love, and it will be my fault for not maintaining boundaries. Callum stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. Elena, look at me. What we have isn't going to fall apart. You don't know that. You can't promise that. I can promise that I love you. The words hung in the air like a struck bell, reverberating through the kitchen and straight into Elena's heart. I love you, he repeated, stepping even closer. I love the way you sing off-key while making breakfast. I love how you remember that Arya likes her sandwiches cut diagonally, and Isla prefers triangles. I love that you've never once tried to replace Margaret, but you've made our house feel like a home again. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Callum, and I love that my daughters trust you completely, that they've learned to love again because of you, that when they're hurt or scared or happy, you're the person they reach for. That's exactly the problem, Elena whispered. What happens when whoever sent this letter follows through on their threats? What happens to your business, your reputation? What happens to the girls when I have to leave? You're not leaving. You don't understand. These people, whoever they are, they have power. They can destroy my career, make sure I never work with children again. They can... Elena. Callum cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. I have power too, more than whoever is trying to intimidate you. and I will use every resource I have to protect you to protect us. And if you can't, for the first time, uncertainty flickered in his dark eyes, because they both knew that some battles couldn't be won with money or influence. Some enemies struck from shadows and some wounds were too deep to heal. Then we'll face whatever comes together, he said finally. As a family. Elena wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that love could conquer faceless threats and social expectations and the complex reality of their situation. But as she looked around the kitchen, where she'd made countless meals, where she'd bandaged scraped knees and wiped away tears, where she'd fallen in love not just with a man but with the idea of belonging somewhere, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was already living on borrowed time. And somewhere in Chicago, in an office filled with expensive suits and heartless calculations, someone was planning their next move to tear apart the family she'd helped rebuild. At 6:23 a.m. on Friday morning, Elena's world exploded across the front page of Chicago's most ruthless gossip blog. She stared at her laptop screen in her small kitchen, coffee growing cold in her hands as the headline blazed in bold letters. Billionaire's nanny, gold digger, or genuine love? Inside the scandalous romance that has Chicago's elite talking. Below the headline were photos, candid shots of her and Callum at the school concert, entering the ice cream parlor with the twins, Elena arriving at his building early in the morning. Someone had been watching them for weeks, documenting their every interaction. Her phone started ringing. Unknown number. Elena Foster? The voice was young, eager. This is Jenny Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your comment on the story about you and Callum Prescott. Elena hung up, her hands shaking. Another call, another reporter, then a text from Callum. Don't go online. Don't answer unknown calls. I'm handling this. But it was too late. Elena was already scrolling through the article, watching her private life dissected with surgical precision. Sources close to the Prescott family reveal that Elena Foster, 28, moved into the billionaire's penthouse under the guise of childcare, but quickly began an intimate relationship with her employer. She's been there every night for weeks, claims an anonymous source. The children are completely attached to her. It's unclear where the nanny role ends and the girlfriend role begins. Foster, a former elementary school teacher from Portland, Oregon, has no formal nanny training or credentials. Questions arise about how she secured such a prestigious position with one of Chicago's wealthiest families. Elena's phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Leave now, while you still can. She was still staring at the message when her apartment buzzer rang. Through the intercom came a voice she didn't recognize. Ms. Foster? We're from the Tribune, just a few questions. Elena grabbed her keys and purse, slipping out the back entrance of her building like a fugitive. She couldn't go to Callum's. There would be reporters there too. Instead, she found herself driving aimlessly through Chicago's morning traffic, her phone buzzing constantly with calls and texts. Finally, she pulled into a small diner in a neighborhood where no one would recognize her. Her hands trembled as she dialed Callum's number. Elena, thank God. Where are you? Some diner on the south side. Callum, have you seen? I've seen everything. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to trace who leaked the information, but the girls. Oh God, the girls, are they okay? Do they know? They're confused. I told them you were sick today, but Elena, I don't know how long I can keep this from them. Elena closed her eyes, imagining Arya and Isla asking where she was, wondering why she wasn't there for their morning routine. I can't come back, she whispered. Not with reporters camped outside your building. Not with my face plastered all over the internet as some kind of predatory gold digger. Elena, listen to me. This will blow over. Stories like this have a short shelf life. Will they? Because the article mentions that I have no formal nanny credentials. What happens when Child Services decides to investigate whether your children are being properly cared for? The silence on the other end told her that Callum had already thought of this possibility. I won't let that happen, he said finally. You can't control everything, Callum, and I won't be the reason your daughters get caught up in some public scandal. So what are you saying? Elena stared out the diner window at the ordinary people living ordinary lives, people who didn't have to worry about their love being front-page news. I'm saying maybe I should take the out I'm being offered. No. Callum's voice was fierce. Elena, no, we can fight this. At what cost? Your reputation, your business, your children's privacy? Before Callum could respond, Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call from the school. I have to take this, she said, switching lines. Ms. Foster? This is Principal Morrison from Lincoln Elementary. I'm calling to inform you that due to the media attention surrounding your relationship with Mr. Prescott, we feel it would be best if you refrained from volunteering at any upcoming school events. Elena felt the last piece of her carefully constructed world crumble. I understand, she managed. I'm sure you appreciate that we need to protect the children from any potential disruption. After hanging up, Elena sat in the diner booth feeling hollowed out. In less than 3 hours, she'd gone from being part of a family to being a liability that needed to be managed. Her phone rang again. Callum. The school called you too, she said before he could speak. Elena, where are you? I'm coming to get you. No, don't you see? This is exactly what they wanted. To make me toxic. To make my presence in your life a problem that needs solving. I don't care what they wanted. I care about you. About us. There is no us anymore, Callum. There can't be. She hung up before he could argue, then turned off her phone entirely. For 2 hours, Elena sat in that diner, nursing coffee and trying to figure out how to disappear from a life she'd never wanted to leave. Finally, she drove to the one place she could think of, Margaret's grave. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. Elena found the simple headstone easily. Margaret Rose Campbell, beloved caregiver, surrogate mother, friend. She made love visible. Elena sank onto the grass beside the grave, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all morning to fall. I don't know what to do, she whispered to the stone. I love them so much, but I think loving them means letting them go. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of spring flowers. They're good girls, Margaret. Aria's reading chapter books now, and Isla learned to ride a bike without training wheels. They still miss you, but they're healing. And Callum, he's a better father than he thinks he is. He just needed to remember how to trust his heart. Elena pulled out her phone, staring at the dozens of missed calls and messages. Among them, a new text from Aria, sent from Callum's phone. Elena, are you really sick? Daddy looks sad and I'm scared. Please come home. The message broke her heart into pieces. Elena typed slowly. I love you so much, sweet girl. Take care of your sister and your daddy for me. She was about to hit send when footsteps approached behind her. I thought I might find you here. Elena turned to see Callum walking across the grass, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his face etched with worry and determination. How did you mentioned visiting Margaret's grave once. It seemed like the kind of place you'd go when the world fell apart. He sat beside her on the grass, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Elena, I know who's behind this. She looked at him sharply. Victoria Hensley. She owns a chain of luxury hotels that competes directly with mine. We've been in negotiations for a merger that would have made her very wealthy. But I pulled out last month when I discovered some ethical issues with her business practices. So this is revenge. This is a calculated attack designed to destabilize my personal life and by extension my business focus. She knows that my family is my weakness, so she's targeting you to get to me. Elena felt a flicker of anger pierce through her despair. I'm collateral damage in some corporate war. You're the woman I love who's being used as a weapon against both of us. Elena stared at Margaret's headstone, trying to process this information. Knowing who's behind it doesn't change anything, Callum. The damage is done. The story is out there. My daughters are asking when Elena is coming home. They don't understand why you're not there. Aria cried herself to sleep last night, and Isla refused to eat breakfast this morning. Elena's resolve wavered. They'll adjust. Children are resilient. Are they? Because it seems to me like we're about to put them through another abandonment, another loss of someone they love. And this time it's by choice. The words hit like physical blows. Margaret wouldn't have run, Callum said quietly. Margaret was family. I'm just your family too. You became family the moment Aria called for you during her fever. You became family when Isla trusted you with her nightmares. You became family when you helped 2 broken little girls learn to love again. Elena closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of the decision before her. What are you asking me to do, Callum? I'm asking you to come home. I'm asking you to fight for us, for them. I'm asking you to trust that love is stronger than whatever Victoria Hensley and her lawyers can throw at us. Elena looked at Margaret's grave one more time, then at the man beside her who was offering her a choice between safety and love, between protecting herself and protecting the family she'd come to cherish. If I come back, she said slowly, if we fight this, there's no guarantee we'll win. No, Callum agreed, but there's a guarantee we'll lose if we don't try. Elena's phone buzzed with another message from the twins. "Please come home, Elena. We need you." And in that moment, Elena realized that running away wouldn't protect the girls from heartbreak. It would guarantee it. Elena stood at the threshold of the Prescott penthouse, her key trembling in her hand, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything forever. It had been 3 days since the cemetery, 3 days since Callum's plea for her to come home and fight, 3 days of hiding in cheap motels while reporters camped outside her apartment, 3 days of missed calls from worried friends, 3 days of her heart breaking every time she thought about Arya and Isla, wondering where she'd gone. This morning, everything had changed. Victoria Hensley had made a critical mistake. Elena pushed open the apartment door to find Callum pacing in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp with barely controlled fury. "Yes, I understand the implications, David. File the lawsuit immediately. I want her and her entire legal team to understand that threatening my family was the worst decision she ever made." He looked up as Elena entered, relief flooding his features. "She's here," he said into the phone. "I'll call you back." "Elena!" Two voices screamed her name simultaneously as Arya and Isla came running from their bedroom, launching themselves into her arms with such force that she staggered backward. "We thought you were gone forever," Arya sobbed into her shoulder. "Daddy said you were sick, but we knew something bad happened," Isla added, her small arms wrapped around Elena's waist like a vice. Elena knelt down to their level, drinking in their faces, thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under their eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry too heavy for 5-year-olds to carry. "I'm so sorry I was away," Elena whispered, smoothing Arya's tangled hair. "I'm so sorry you were scared. Are you back for real? Or are you going to disappear again?" Isla's question was direct, fearless, demanding truth. Elena looked over their heads at Callum, who was watching with an expression of hope and terror. "I'm back for real," Elena said firmly. "If you'll have me. Forever and ever?" Arya needed the promise stated clearly. Forever and ever. Both girls erupted into tears, relief, joy, and residual fear all tangled together. Elena held them until their sobs subsided into hiccups, until they'd convinced themselves she was solid and real, and not going anywhere. "Girls," Callum said gently, "why don't you show Elena what you made for her while she was away?" They raced off to their room, leaving Elena and Callum alone for the first time in 3 days. "You came back," he said softly. "Victoria Hensley made a mistake. She went after the girls directly." Callum's face darkened. "What do you mean?" Elena pulled out her phone, showing him the screenshot she'd captured before deleting the original message. "She had someone send this to the school, claiming I had a history of inappropriate relationships with employers. She tried to get child services to open an investigation into whether your children were safe in my care." Callum's hands clenched into fists. That vindictive, but she overplayed her hand. "When I called Principal Morrison to ask about the allegations, she admitted they'd received an anonymous tip with detailed personal information about me that could only have come from a private investigator. Information that happened to be completely fabricated. Which means we have evidence of harassment, defamation, and filing false reports with government agencies. Your lawyers are going to have a field day." Callum stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Elena, this is going to get ugly before it gets better. Victoria has resources, connections. She's not going to go down quietly. I know, but I also know that 3 days ago I watched 2 little girls' hearts break because someone they loved disappeared without explanation. I won't do that to them again. I won't do that to myself. And us? What about us?" Elena met his gaze directly. "I love you, Callum. I love your daughters. I love the life we've built together, even if it's messy and complicated and apparently newsworthy. If you want to fight for this family, then I'm fighting with you." Before Callum could respond, the twins returned carrying a large poster board covered in crayon drawings, glitter, and stickers. "We made you a welcome home sign," Arya announced proudly. The poster read, "Elena's family," in multicolored letters, with stick figure drawings of all 4 of them, holding hands under a rainbow. In the corner, someone had carefully drawn a 5th figure with wings and a halo labeled "Margaret watching." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Isla said we should include Margaret because she's still part of our family even though she's in heaven," Arya explained. "And you're part of our family even though you're not our mom," Isla added with 5-year-old logic. "But maybe you could be our Elena mom?" "Elena mom?" Elena repeated, her voice catching. "Like how Margaret was our Margaret mom. Different from a regular mom, but still a mom." Elena looked at Callum, who was watching this exchange with wonder and love radiating from his face. "I would be honored to be your Elena, Mom," she said solemnly. Both girls cheered, then immediately began planning where to hang their welcome home sign. As they debated locations with the seriousness of interior designers, Callum pulled Elena aside. "There's something else," he said quietly. "I've been doing some thinking while you were gone. About us, about the future, about what we want this family to look like." Elena's heart began to race. "The 6-month contract expires next week," he continued. "I know. I don't want to renew it." Elena felt the world tilt sideways. "Callum, I want to tear it up completely. I want you here not as an employee but as family. I want you here because you choose to be, because this is your home too." "What are you saying?" Callum took her hands in his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her palms. "I'm saying that I want to build a life with you. A real life with no contracts or professional boundaries or questions about where you fit. I want you to be my partner in raising these girls. I want you to be the person I come home to every night and wake up beside every morning." Elena's breath caught. "Callum." "Elena," Arya's voice interrupted from across the room. "Come help us hang this up." "In a minute, sweetheart," Elena called back, her eyes never leaving Callum's face. "I know it's complicated," he continued. "I know we're going to face more challenges, more people who want to tear us apart. But Elena, I also know that what we have is worth fighting for." "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes to what?" "Yes to all of it. Yes to building a life together. Yes to being a family. Yes to fighting for what we have. Just yes." Callum's smile was radiant. He cupped her face in his hands, leaning down to kiss her gently. Their first real kiss, soft and full of promise and hope. "Elena, Daddy," Isla's impatient voice broke them apart. "We need you to reach the high spot." They turned to find both girls watching them with knowing smiles. "Are you going to get married?" Arya asked with the directness that never failed to catch adults off guard. "Maybe someday," Elena said, feeling heat creep up her neck. "Good." Isla nodded approvingly. "Because Margaret always said families are made of people who choose to love each other every day." "She said that?" Callum asked softly. "She said lots of things, but that was the most important one." As they hung the welcome home sign in the kitchen where everyone would see it, Elena felt something settle in her chest, a sense of belonging she'd been searching for her entire life. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." Elena showed it to Callum, who deleted it without a second thought. "Let Victoria Hensley do her worst," he said quietly. "We have something she'll never understand. A family built on love instead of calculation." That evening, as Elena tucked the twins into bed, Arya reached up to whisper in her ear, "Elena, I'm glad you came back." "I'm glad too, sweetheart. And I'm glad you're going to stay forever." "Forever and ever," Elena confirmed. "Like Margaret did?" Elena thought about the woman who'd loved this family first, who'd shown them all what unconditional love looked like. "Like Margaret did," she agreed. "Different, but just as real." As Elena turned off the bedroom light, she caught sight of their reflection in the window, a woman saying goodnight to 2 children who trusted her completely, in a home where she finally belonged. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of challenges and possibilities. But inside, Elena Foster, soon to be Elena Prescott, was exactly where she was meant to be, coming full circle. 2 years later, Elena stood in the same kitchen where she'd first made star-shaped pancakes, but now the morning chaos belonged to her completely. "Mommy, Elena, Arya took my favorite hair bow," 7-year-old Isla called from the hallway, her voice carrying the particular outrage reserved for sister-related injustices. "I didn't take it. I borrowed it," Arya protested, appearing in the kitchen doorway with said bow perched perfectly in her dark hair. "And it looks better on me anyway." Elena glanced at Callum, who was attempting to read the financial news while simultaneously braiding a second-grade level friendship bracelet that Isla had insisted he learn to make. His concentration face, tongue slightly visible between his lips, never failed to make Elena's heart flutter. "Girls," Elena said with the practiced calm of someone who'd learned that 7-year-olds respond better to gentle authority than raised voices. "What's our family rule about borrowing? Ask first," both twins recited in unison, though Arya's tone suggested she found this rule unnecessarily restrictive. "And what's our rule about sharing?" "Everything in our family belongs to all of us," Isla added, "but we still have to ask because it's polite." "Exactly. So Arya, what should you do?" Arya sighed dramatically. a skill she'd perfected over the past 2 years. Isla, may I please borrow your favorite hair bow for school today? Yes, but I get to borrow your butterfly clips tomorrow. Deal. Crisis averted. Elena returned to packing lunchboxes, smiling at how naturally she'd slipped into the rhythm of family life. The transition from nanny to mother figure to legal guardian to, finally, Callum's wife had happened gradually, like seasons changing. So slowly you don't notice until suddenly everything looks different. By the way, Callum said, looking up from his friendship bracelet, I got a call from Principal Morrison yesterday. The girls have been selected to present at the district's Family Heritage Celebration next month. Present what? Elena asked, though she had a suspicion. A project about how families come in different forms, Isla announced proudly. We're calling it How Elena Became Our Mom Even Though She Started as Our Friend. Elena felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came whenever the girls casually referred to her as their mom. It had started about a year ago, begun by Aria during a parent-teacher conference when she'd introduced Elena to her new teacher as My Mom, Elena. The teacher had accepted this without question, and somehow that simple moment had made it official in ways that paperwork never could. And we're going to tell everyone about Margaret too, Aria added, spreading peanut butter on bread with the focused intensity of a master craftsman. Because she's the one who taught Daddy how to love us, and then she sent you to teach us how to love again. Elena blinked back tears. Even now, 2 years later, the girl's matter-of-fact wisdom about love and family could catch her completely off guard. That sounds like a beautiful project, she managed. Mrs. Patterson said we should bring photos, Isla continued, including ones of Margaret and our wedding and the day you officially adopted us. The adoption. Elena touched the simple gold necklace Callum had given her on that day 6 months ago, a delicate chain with 2 small birthstones representing Aria and Isla, and a tiny star for Margaret. The legal process had been surprisingly straightforward, especially after Victoria Hensley's harassment lawsuit had been settled in their favor. But the emotional weight of signing papers that made her officially responsible for these 2 remarkable children had left Elena sobbing in the courthouse bathroom, while Callum rubbed her back and murmured reassurances. Don't forget the picture of Margaret's room, Aria added thoughtfully. Elena paused in her lunchmaking. Margaret's room? The one we took before we turned it into the baby's room. So everyone knows we didn't just forget about her. Elena's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, where a tiny life had been growing for 12 weeks. They'd only told the girls last month, once they'd passed the first trimester, and their reactions had been everything Elena could have hoped for. A real baby? Isla had whispered, eyes wide. Like, a baby that will live here with us? A baby that will be your little brother or sister, Callum had explained. Will you love the baby more than us? Aria had asked with the heartbreaking directness that children possessed. Love isn't like pizza, Elena had told them, using an analogy she'd learned from a parenting book. When you love more people, you don't get smaller pieces. Your heart just gets bigger to hold all the love. Now, watching the girls pack their backpacks with the casual efficiency of second graders, Elena marveled at how naturally they'd accepted the idea of becoming big sisters. They'd spent hours debating baby names, drawing pictures for the nursery, and solemnly promising to teach their new sibling everything important, like how to tie shoes, why vegetables weren't actually poison, and that Elena gave the best hugs when you had nightmares. All right, beautiful chaos, Callum announced, standing and presenting his completed friendship bracelet to Isla. Time for school. The morning departure routine had evolved into a well-choreographed dance. Elena kissed each girl goodbye, reminded them about after-school violin lessons, and promised to pick them up at exactly 3:15. Callum grabbed his briefcase and the travel mug of coffee Elena had prepared, kissing her thoroughly before heading out to manage his hotel empire. I love you, Mrs. Prescott, he murmured against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Prescott. After they left, Elena stood in the quiet kitchen, her hands resting on her stomach, taking in the beautiful chaos of the life they'd built. Aria's art project materials scattered across the counter, Isla's library books stacked by the door, Callum's reading glasses forgotten beside his coffee cup, the family calendar covered in different colored pens tracking school events, business trips, doctor appointments, and playdates. This was the life she'd never dared to dream of. Messy, complicated, absolutely perfect. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Portland. How's the pregnancy going? Are you glowing yet or just nauseous? Elena smiled, typing back. Both. The girls are convinced I'm growing a future astronaut. Callum keeps buying pregnancy books and leaving them strategically around the house. And you? How are you handling it all? Elena paused, looking around the kitchen where she'd fallen in love with a family that had needed her as much as she'd needed them. I'm happy, she typed. Scared and excited and overwhelmed and grateful, but mostly just really, really happy. Margaret would be proud, her sister responded, and Elena felt the familiar bittersweet pang that came with thoughts of the woman who'd started this story. Elena walked to the living room, where a new photo had been added to the family gallery last week, their wedding picture. It had been a small ceremony in the penthouse, with just close family and friends. The girls had been Elena's bridesmaids, wearing matching lavender dresses and carrying tiny bouquets. But Elena's favorite detail had been the single empty chair in the front row, draped with a beautiful shawl that had belonged to Margaret, honoring the woman whose love had made this family possible. At 2:30, Elena drove to Lincoln Elementary for pickup, arriving early as she always did. She parked in the same spot she'd used for 2 years and watched other parents gathering, marveling at how completely she belonged here now. No one questioned her presence anymore. No one wondered about her relationship to the Prescott twins. She was simply Aria and Isla's mom, the woman who volunteered for field trips and knew both girls' favorite snacks and could braid hair in 17 different styles. Elena! Both girls spotted her the moment they emerged from the building, running toward her with the unbridled joy that made every school pickup feel like a reunion. How was school? Elena asked as they buckled themselves into their car seats, a skill they'd mastered but still sometimes needed help with when the straps were particularly stubborn. Amazing, Aria announced. I got picked to be the narrator in our class play about recycling. And I got 100% on my math test, Isla added. Mrs. Rodriguez said I should consider joining the advanced math group next year. Elena felt the familiar surge of pride that came with their accomplishments, small and large. I'm so proud of both of you. Should we celebrate with ice cream before violin lessons? Yes, they chorused, then immediately began debating flavors. As they drove through Chicago streets now familiar as home, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked different than she had 2 years ago, more confident, more settled, wearing the particular glow that came from knowing exactly where you belonged. Elena? Aria's voice interrupted her thoughts. Do you think Margaret knows about the baby? I think she knows about everything, Elena replied. And I think she's happy for all of us. Good, Isla said with satisfaction, because I think she picked you especially for us, like how fairy godmothers pick the right people in stories. Elena's eyes filled with tears, the happy kind that came frequently during pregnancy but also from the simple truth of loving and being loved completely. I think you might be right, she said. That evening, after violin lessons and homework and dinner and baths and bedtime stories, Elena and Callum sat on their couch, her feet in his lap while he absently rubbed her ankles. The penthouse was quiet, except for the distant sounds of Chicago 40 floors below. Do you ever think about that first day? Callum asked suddenly, when you walked into my office with that handwritten contract? Every day, Elena admitted. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? Callum's hands stilled on her feet. Regret falling in love with you? Regret watching you heal my daughter's hearts? Regret building this family? I mean the complications, the media attention, the legal battles, the way everything changed so quickly. Callum was quiet for a long moment, considering. You know what I regret? He said finally. I regret that Margaret didn't get to see this. I regret that she didn't get to meet you, to watch the girls flourish under your care, to hold her new grandchild. Elena's hand moved to her stomach. Do you think she would have liked me? Elena, love, she would have adored you. She would have seen exactly what I see. Someone who loves without reservation, who stayed when things got difficult, who turned a house back into a home. Even though I was never supposed to fall in love with any of you. Callum leaned over to kiss her forehead. Especially because you fell in love with us. Margaret always said the best families aren't planned, they're discovered. Later that night, as Elena lay in bed listening to Callum's steady breathing beside her, she placed both hands on her growing belly and whispered a promise to the child sleeping there. You're going to love it here, little one. You have the best big sisters in the world, and a daddy who will teach you that love is both the scariest and bravest thing you can do. And you have a Margaret watching over you from heaven, even though you'll never meet her. She paused, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. And you have me, someone who learned that sometimes the family you're looking for finds you instead. Someone who knows that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to love you day after day, even when it's complicated. Outside their bedroom window, Chicago sparkled in the darkness, and inside, Elena Foster Prescott fell asleep, surrounded by the quiet breathing of the family she'd never planned but couldn't imagine living without. A family built on patience, trust, and the radical belief that love, when it's real, always finds a way. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we never saw coming. What unexpected blessing has taught you that love doesn't always follow the script we write for our lives? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.